Hi everyone, you already know what the topic of this video is, and before I even get started, I'm going to say something. A lot of people instantly get their claws out when I talk about IVF for some reason. So I just want to make one thing really clear. In this video, I am not trying to change your mind or tell you what to do with your body. Instead, I'm just telling you what I'm doing with mine. I've had some family members who have practically pleaded with me to please do IVF because they know how bad I want a baby and they want me to have a baby badly as well. I've also had people who completely removed me from fertility groups because I'm not willing to do IVF for myself. So there's probably going to be the backlash like that, I'm assuming, from this video. So I want to first say this. I'm going to respect whatever you choose to do with your body. And if you choose to do IVF, I wish you the best. I'm not choosing to do IVF, and I would love it if you just wish me the best as well. So a lot of people, when I say I'm not going to do IVF, the question is always, why? Oh my gosh, why won't you? And so I want to start with this. I actually have a career background as being a certified newborn care specialist and postpartum doula. And so I, as you can imagine, have a lot of knowledge in terms of how babies come into this world. And many of my clients, hundreds of my clients, gave birth via IVF, and so they have miracle babies who they love, and that is the beautiful side of IVF. People can have babies who may not have been able to have babies otherwise. But I also got to see the darker side of IVF because I was more behind the scenes than probably the average person gets to be. So I'm going to go over some reasons that we are not going to do IVF. And again, if you're going to do IVF, wish you the best. Nothing against you. Matter of fact, I have a friend who did IVF, and I would cover her shifts for her so that she could recuperate. And she's pregnant, and I'm so happy for her. So, having said that, let's get into the darker facts. A lot of this is stuff that people don't talk about, including doctors. A lot of doctors don't shed the light on this, and I'm going to do that. So, the first thing is, if you are going to do IVF, you need to know that there is an increased prematurity risk and also an increased risk of your baby having a low birth weight. I cannot tell you how many babies I took care of that were born premature and super tiny. And when I asked the parents to tell me their journey and tell me about their baby, they would say he's an IVF baby or she's an IVF baby. Now, I know you're going to say, well, you could have problems like that with conceiving the normal way. And that's true. I don't want to increase risks. And this is my choice. The next fact you should know is that ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome happens. And not only does it happen, it's incredibly painful. You become very swollen, and it can be anywhere from mild to severe. In severe cases, you die. And I've had lots of people have this. It wasn't an uncommon thing. If that happens, they have to do aspiration of the accumulated fluids, which means they're just draining it out of you. I had a friend who had liters and liters and liters of fluid pulled out of her, and it would just replace itself. I don't want to go through that. So, having said that, I also want to tell you about the miscarriage risk. You have a 15 to 25% rate of miscarriage, and it's higher depending on your age. If you're using frozen embryos, it's higher than that as well. And then egg retrieval complications, things like bleeding, infection, damage to your bowel, damage to your bladder, damage to blood vessels, that happens a lot more often than people talk about. The next concern for me is ectopic pregnancy risks. There's a 2 to 5% risk of having an ectopic pregnancy. Well, I have blocked fallopian tubes with scar tissue, so that's already a risk of mine. I don't need to increase the risk of that in any way. And then if you do have an ectopic pregnancy, there won't be a baby. They have to stop that pregnancy or you could die. Another risk that people don't talk about are the birth defects. And they're pretty significant, and they're not all that uncommon. So let's talk about the birth defects. Your baby could be born with heart defects, urogenital tract malformations, which is basically where the urethra, where the pee comes out. On boys, it can be located in kind of the wrong location. And then also tumors are twice as likely. And then we see a connection with IVF and cancer of the retina, of the eye on babies. So that's not a risk I want to put my unborn baby through simply because I really want to have a baby. The next one is ovarian cancer. Your risk if you go through IVF is 2.7 times as high. You are more than, that's almost 3 times as likely to have ovarian cancer. Let me tell you guys something. Cancer runs in my family. There's no reason for me to increase that. I want to be alive to enjoy my baby. I don't want to be so focused on having one that I put my body in such extreme danger and risk of cancer that I don't get to raise my child. Also, the stress that you go through, it's emotional, financial, physical. It affects your marriage. And then let's talk about these hormones that they're pumping into you. My husband and I try to eat organic everything as much as possible. We cheat sometimes. But if you're trying to be really cautious about what you put into your body, then it doesn't really make sense to pump yourself with hormones. So let's talk about autism next. There's autism in my husband's family, both on his mom's side and his dad's side. And maybe you guys may or may not know this. I actually found this out when I was doing my research, but kids are actually twice as likely to have autism than children not born IVF. And they collected this data off of 5.9 million births in my state, California. That's crazy to me. I want to have a healthy baby. We're doing all of this because we want to be healthy. We want to have a healthy baby. And our child is 2 times as likely to have autism. It's just mind-blowing. Also, with postpartum depression, you are 4 times as likely to have postpartum depression if you go through IVF. 4 times as likely. Now, I'll tell you guys, as a postpartum doula, I specialized in postpartum depression. I will tell you, like 99% of my cases that I worked with women who had postpartum depression, they did IVF. Now, can you get postpartum depression without doing IVF? Absolutely you can. Of course you can. But I don't want to increase my risks. I am already in what we would say like the likelihood of someone who would have postpartum depression. There are certain triggers, there are certain things that can sort of predict or tell you it's likely, and I have those things. So for me, I don't want to increase my postpartum depression likeliness by 4 times. Also, you have a much higher probability of a C-section. For me, if my client went through IVF, I would almost automatically assume they were going to have a C-section, and I would say probably 8 or 9 out of 10 did. There are some that do have vaginal births. For me, one of the things that I look so forward to in terms of getting pregnant is experiencing that labor, I know it sounds crazy, like who wants to? I envision, being in a jacuzzi tub and having candles lit and probably being in really big pain, but getting through it with my husband and a midwife. And it's very unlikely that would happen if you go through IVF. Possible, but unlikely. The next thing is breast cancer. Did you know you're 1/3 more likely to have breast cancer if you do IVF? Whew. We all know how high our risks are for breast cancer in the world we live in today. I don't want to increase that any more than it already is. And as I mentioned before in this video, I have a lot of family members who have had cancer, and almost all of the deaths in my family have been from cancer. So for me, it doesn't make sense to increase that risk. Let's talk about the cost. Okay, you probably thought this was going to be the first thing I said, was that it's just too expensive. No, I'm really fortunate to be my own boss. I'm really fortunate that I can work from home and that I work for a great company that pays really well. And yes, cost is high. It really is. The cost of IVF can be between $12,000 and $20,000 per attempt, and there's no guarantees. One of my clients did IVF 7 times. She had 7 miscarriages. Whew. So there's no guarantees. The average woman needs to do IVF 3 times in order to get pregnant. So let's say that you're the average person and you have to do IVF 3 times. That would mean that you would have spent over $60,000 to hopefully have a baby. And I know what you're going to say. Well, Michelle, it's worth it to me. A baby is priceless. I agree, a baby is priceless. But there's another way that you can have a baby, and so we'll talk about that in a second. The success rate for IVF is also something I think you should be informed on. Of course, there's lots of factors to this. So let's, if I play devil's advocate here, there's lots of factors that affect your likelihood of being successful or not. But about 1/3 get pregnant after 1 cycle, and 70% need more than 3 cycles. My clients actually consistently struggled with their IVF experiences, and even my friends did. And of course, if you talk to them now, they're happy that they have babies. But if you talk to them now, a lot of the babies that my friends have, and even my clients, there's a delay of some sort. So we'll talk about that also in a second. Needles for me are an issue. They're not the biggest issue. Of course, I would deal with needles if it meant I could have a baby, but it's not just needles. So needles are not on the pro side for me of the vaccinations. I mean, of the vaccinations is a whole other video. The needles for me are not a factor that I'd like to do with IVF, of course. And then I want to share that my story. So as a child, I was really kind of adopted. It wasn't formal, but I was taken in by different amazing people because my mother did not raise me. And so I've always sort of felt drawn to adoption. I felt so fortunate. I felt so loved to have the people who took me in. And some of them took me in for a week, some of them took me in for a week, some took me in for a lifetime, and some took me in for a season. But I'm so grateful to everyone who took me in, and I feel almost like I had lots of mothers instead of, some people would say, oh, that sucks you didn't have a mom. No, I felt like I had lots of great moms that helped raise me. So, including my grandma and my aunt, and so adoption for me feels right. If I cannot conceive naturally, adoption feels right. I feel that if God wanted me to have a baby, He will give me one. And some people say, well, God gives you doctors. Yeah, I'll let God give me a baby. And if God doesn't give me a baby, then God will give me a baby through adoption. And I truly do believe that. You have to go with your gut. You have to go with what feels right. And don't let anyone tell you what you should or shouldn't do. The other thing that I think is interesting is that IVF is actually fairly new. IVF began in 1978. And some scientists are actually worried that kids that are born with IVF are going to have health problems later on down the line. Things like chronic diseases are actually programmed into them. That's a concern that they have. And babies that were born from 1978 are in their late 30s, so we don't really know what the long-term effects are yet. They did study mice about this, and the mice that were studied have actually pretty bad cardiovascular problems. They have raised blood pressure, they have advanced bone age, and they have a different body fat composition. They also have a cardiometabolic disease later on in life. So if that's any inclination of what could happen for our children, it feels selfish to me. This is just me. I'm not saying this to offend anybody, but it feels selfish to me to bring a child into the world knowing all of this. And you know what? There are babies out there who need a home. There are babies out there who will love you, and you can be their mommy. And it doesn't matter that they don't have your DNA. So, having said that, that is why I won't do IVF. And I feel very strongly about my decision. I know it's the right decision for me, and that's all that matters. It doesn't have to be the right decision for you. You don't have to agree with it. You get to make the decision that's right for you. So, hopefully this was helpful to those of you that are, I've got a lot of messages asking, why not IVF, Michelle? Why not IVF? And so now you know. Now you know why we won't be doing IVF. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. If you want to see the updates that happen in my fertility journey, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And again, thank you all for those of you who have been very supportive. There have certainly been a share that weren't, but we'll focus on the positive. And I really appreciate all of you guys. Take care.